car. We have heard it is possibly the suspect. We are waiting formal confirmation on that. Also, the question, Josh, of motive. What was it that was driving this person? I also have a lot of questions, Josh, about who these victims were. Talk us through what we know now and the questions that you still have as we wait for this conference to get underway.
Well, certainly one of the top questions is a little bit more information about these victims, because so far, really the only thing that law enforcement has revealed was that it was 5 males and 5 females who have unfortunately died, and that there's another 10 victims in varying states of injury who are in the hospital. But certainly as this process moves forward, we expect to hear more about who those individuals were, what they were doing and this evening when they were shot by this suspected gunman, and to start to learn about the lives of the families who are going to be permanently affected by this tragedy. Of course, others who were present for this, who are also going to have lasting effects from being part of this awful experience. And we should not forget that there were actually 2 incidents with 2 sets of people who are going to be dealing with the aftermath of this crisis. Not only the shooting here in Monterey Park, but of course that second ballroom where there was what seems like a potentially attempted second shooting that thankfully was averted when those witnesses were able to get the gun away from the suspected gunman. But this is a community that is going to have to be going through a really painful process going forward as their sense of security is really shattered. We've heard on the ground here today from people who talk about what a close-knit community this is, the fact that this is a place particularly for Asian Americans to feel safe in their own community, to feel like they're amongst friends, and not to feel like when they go out on a Saturday night to go dancing or to enjoy their family and friends in the middle of the Lunar New Year celebrations, like they might face some type of terrible violence. So that sense.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Kate Snow.
Good evening. We're coming on the air with breaking news about the manhunt for the suspect in last night's deadly shooting here in Monterey Park, California. 10 people were killed, 10 others were injured. Just moments ago, NBC News learned that authorities believe the suspect is dead. Police had tracked down a white van in nearby Torrance, California. It was believed to be connected to the shooting. Police surrounded that vehicle this afternoon. The man inside is now deceased. Last night's shooting rocked this predominantly Asian American community on what was supposed to be a night of celebration for the Lunar New Year. Steve Patterson is at the site of that standoff in Torrance, California. Steve, what have we learned?
Kate, this all ended here in Torrance. Police surrounding that vehicle. As you mentioned, this is a white vehicle that witnesses say matched the suspect vehicle that was seen at the scene of the crime on Saturday night. They surrounded the vehicle. They break in the vehicle. They find a man dead. Now NBC News Investigates is reporting that the death is from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Police still have to do the work of matching the identity using medical records to the actual suspect who apparently perpetrated those crimes on Saturday night. But this is one step closer to police determining exactly who this was and hopefully leading to a motive. Again, that suspect inside, or the person inside that white van, apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound upon authorities finding that van earlier today after an hours-long standoff here in Torrance. And remember, this is all after, obviously, that horrific night following what was supposed to be a beautiful day for the Asian American community, there in Monterey Park. This was a celebration of one of the largest Lunar New Year celebrations really in the country, especially here in Southern California. Thousands of people took to the street. But as that was breaking down, those gunshots rang out at about 10:20. And what followed was chaos. Police getting on scene, finding, again, 10 people dead, 10 more injured, some sustaining life-threatening injuries, others fortunately stable. But obviously, we're learning more about their conditions. And then moving on. 20 minutes later in Alhambra, another situation where a man tried to enter a similar style business with a weapon. That man thankfully disarmed, obviously, and police got their hands on that weapon. They've had the weapon ever since, and they're investigating that incident. But now what police are trying to do is match all of these incidents and line it up to what they found today. Again, another apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound of a person in that white van. This is what police are now investigating. This is where the investigation has led them. Kate?
Yeah. And Steve, it's a relief to some extent for this community that at least the threat is now over in this incident. But of course, as you say, 10 people lost, 10 more still fighting in hospitals. That's going to conclude this NBC News special report. We will have much more on NBC Nightly News on the West Coast and on your late local news everywhere else. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kate Snow reporting from Monterey Park, California. Good night.
Minneapolis after Derek's arrest.
How could I be so dumb? I basically...
To be able to be a part of the Vice President's address today.
Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher, thank you for talking with us about what is happening in California, the need for gun safety reform, and a little bit of that conversation that we had promised we would have. Appreciate you. In breaking news out of California, the possible suspect in the shooting that killed 10 people and injured 10 others in Monterey Park is dead. He was found in a van law enforcement suspected was connected to the gunman. Law enforcement officials are expected to provide more updates moments from now. The gunman opened fire during a Chinese Lunar New Year celebration at a ballroom dance hall. Took place in a predominantly Asian community where thousands were gathered in celebration. I want to bring in Josh Letterman, who I believe we have ready on the line. Is Josh there? Josh, what more can you tell us?
Well, we are just learning in the last few minutes that that suspect that you were talking about, that person who was in the van, died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. That comes to us via two law enforcement officials who spoke to NBC's Andrew Blankstein. And according to those officials, it's going to take some time for police to identify positively who that person was because of the location of their injury. So still some unanswered questions here, but if you start to lay out the chronology of how this has unfolded over the last several hours, Alicia, you can start to get a sense of what might have transpired here. We heard first from the LA County Sheriff saying that there was this individual they were looking for and that they were looking for this white cargo van. They put out a bulletin alert to try to notify the public as well as public safety agencies, basically police departments elsewhere here in the Los Angeles region. And then we saw this standoff start to take place over in Torrance, about half an hour from here. And in a Spanish language news conference, an official from the sheriff's office mentioned that this van had been involved in some type of a traffic stop. So that's about all the information we have on that. But apparently this van, which was spotted, if it is the same van, was spotted near the scene in Alhambra and then spotted, it's involved in some type of traffic stop in Torrance, then surrounded by these SWAT vehicles for hours, and ultimately police discovering the person inside dead, according to those law enforcement officials, of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, Alicia.
All right.
New favorite shows, documentaries, and movies now on Fox Nation.
A Fox News alert. I'm John Scott in New York. New developments tonight on a story we've been following throughout the day. That massacre at a ballroom dance club outside Los Angeles. At this hour, police in Monterey Park confirm the suspected gunman died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound inside the white van you see here. He apparently took his life as SWAT officers surrounded his vehicle this afternoon, not far from last night's crime scene. The mass killing claimed 10 lives and left another 10 people wounded. It happened as the victims were celebrating the Lunar New Year. There are reports the gunman later tried to enter another nearby dance club, but patrons there were able to wrestle the weapon away from him, and he ran away. The motive behind the killings is not yet known. We'll continue to follow this story and bring you any updates as they are required. I'm John Scott. Now, back to Life, Liberty, and Levin.
Let us go to Monterey Park, where the LA County Sheriff's Department is holding a press conference on the mass shooting.
In with us today, it's been a very challenging day. So let me give you what I believe will be the last update of the day, and then after the speakers, I'll come back up here to answer any questions that you may have. Earlier today, the Sheriff's homicide investigators, working alongside all of our law enforcement partners, were able to confirm the identity of the male inside the white cargo van as the suspect in the mass shooting that we had in Monterey Park. Based on the previous information relayed by homicide investigators regarding the white van involved and seen leaving the scene of the incident in the city of Alhambra, the Torrance Police Department was notified, and at 10:20 a.m., the Torrance police officers located the white van matching the description near the area of Sepulveda Boulevard and Hawthorne Boulevard. As Torrance officers pulled behind the vehicle, the white van entered a shopping center parking lot. When officers exited their patrol vehicle to contact the occupant, they heard one gunshot coming from within the van. Officers retreated and requested several tactical teams to respond. 2 armored vehicles responded and were able to restrict the van's movement. At 12:52 p.m., our sheriff's SWAT team approached and cleared the van and determined the suspect sustained a self-inflicted gunshot wound and was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators conducted a search of the vehicle and determined the male inside the van was the mass shooting suspect. During the search, several pieces of evidence were found inside the van linking the suspect to both locations in Monterey Park and Alhambra. In addition, a handgun was discovered inside the van. The suspect has been identified as Hu Can Tran, and the way that's spelled is H-U-U, middle name C-A-N, last name T-R-A-N. He is a 72-year-old male Asian. I can confirm that there are no outstanding suspects from the mass shooting incident that occurred in the city of Monterey Park. And although that closes a portion of a very long day for all of us, the investigation is still ongoing. Sheriff's homicide detectives are working around the clock, gathering additional information and working on determining the motive behind this extremely tragic event. I would like to thank Chief Weiss and the Monterey Park Police Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, the United States Department of Justice, the Torrance Police Department, the District Attorney's Office, Supervisor Hilda Solis, who has been here with us for the previous pressers, and the surrounding South Bay law enforcement agencies. Initially, we're giving thanks to the Monterey Park Fire Department for their life-saving measures. I was informed before coming out here, we still have 7 victims who are hospitalized. And I'm sure that the work of our firefighters and police officers contributed to saving at least those lives. As I stand up here, I'm very proud, really, of all of us, the community, all of you in the media. I could say we did this together. We really did. And when there's tragedy, we have to lean on each other, and that's what we did. But before I walk off and turn it over to the next speaker, When I got here and I saw, and I told you this morning, the look in the eyes of the homicide investigators and all of their staff, you could just tell they were going to get this guy. And although I couldn't talk in detail about that earlier today, I'm very proud of Captain Andy Meyer and the whole entire Homicide Bureau, who not only got us to this point, but there's a lot of work and investigation to be done. And just real quick before I turn it over to the next speaker, you've been asking me about motive. We still are not clear on the motive. The investigation continues, and that is something we are all extremely, we want to know. We want to know how something like this, something this awful can happen. Also in regards to the weapons, there was a handgun, as I described, that was discovered in the van with the suspect. The weapon that was recovered from the Alhambra location, in which, remember, the suspect went to the Alhambra location after he conducted the shooting, and he was disarmed by two community members who I consider to be heroes because they saved lives. This could have been much worse. The weapon that we recovered at that second scene, I'm describing as a magazine-fed semi-automatic assault pistol. Not an assault rifle, but an assault pistol that had an extended large capacity magazine attached to it. That's the pistol that was recovered at the location in Alhambra. So with that, I'll come back up for questions after the rest of our partners behind me speak. So I'll turn that now over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Right. I'm Congressmember Judy Chu, and I represent Monterey Park. I want to give my enormous thanks and gratitude to law enforcement for finding this shooter. All this afternoon, the community was in fear, thinking that they should not go to any events because there was an active shooter. But law enforcement came out and they were able to find the shooter with not even 24 hours passing. So I really have to thank LA County Sheriffs, and thank you so much, Sheriff Luna. Sheriff Luna, please, a big round of applause. I want to thank our Monterey Park Police Department and Police Chief Scott Weiss for keeping us safe in this community. I want to thank the Torrance Police Department for identifying the suspect and ultimately making sure that he was caught. And I want to thank all who've come together today, from the national level to the local level. Our local city council, which has been amazing, but also I got calls today from the White House, from the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, and from our mayor, Karen Bass. All expressed concerns and offered their resources to us to make sure that we could end this terrible situation. I still have questions in my mind, which is, what was the motive for this shooter? Did he have a mental illness? Was he a domestic violence abuser? How did he get these guns? And was it through legal means or not? Well, those questions will have to be answered in the future. But what I want to do here is to say to the community, feel safe. You are no longer in danger because this shooter is gone. And so, I told you this morning, I've lived in this city for 37 years, and I was mayor and city council member at one time. And I said that this community is resilient. And what I saw today and what I see at this moment is indeed We are resilient, and we are stronger together.
Hello, I'm State Senator Susan Rubio. I represent the city of Monterey Park. And I want to start by offering condolences to all the families that are today destroyed and trying to find a way to keep moving forward with such a loss. I want to also commend those two individuals that tackled the gun away from the second incident, because we would be standing here with a lot more tragedy. So I want to thank those two individuals, and we hope to honor them at some point in the near future. But I also want to commend our public safety, from our local police to our Sheriff Luna and everyone that did what needed to be done to ensure that we bring safety back into our community. So as you heard Congresswoman express, we want to make sure that our community knows it's still a safe community. So thank you to all those that were working really diligently to ensure that we capture the individual responsible for these senseless acts of violence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everybody. Tonight's the Lunar New Year, and we would be celebrating that tonight, but obviously we can't. The officers that were here last night are just coming back on duty right now. They're upstairs and briefing. When I get done talking to you here, I'll go back upstairs and make sure that my officers are mindful of what took place and that they're in a good place tonight, because their wellness means a lot to me, and the only way that they're going to protect this community is if they're mentally prepared to do so. So that's where I'll be going after this. I want to thank Sheriff Luna and the partnerships with the Sheriff's Department and all of our federal, state, and local partners. We couldn't have done this without their help. I want to thank the Torrance Police Department for being so vigilant to spot this vehicle. Thank you very much. We have a long way to go to heal this community. The police department here in Monterey Park will be present every moment of the day from this point on to make sure this community remains safe. That's our commitment to everybody here, and we will continue to do that into the future. I'd like to open it up for any questions.
Sheriff, did the white van, did it have stolen plates on?
When we got to the van, it did have different plates. So I'm assuming they were stolen. They weren't the plates that belong on the van.
And did Torrance, did they get a hit off of it? Was it a camera hit that hit on that stolen plate?
It was something similar to that. And that's, again, part of our partnerships with all of our agencies and some of the process we use to catch a very dangerous person and get them off the streets.
Sheriff, you talked earlier about that you don't have a motive right now. I wanted to ask you something that could play a role in that. Is there any indication that the suspect, who's now dead, knew any of the victims or knew people at either of these two locations?
We're still looking into that. That's part of what the homicide detectives are investigating. Please keep in mind that, especially with the deceased victims, the coroner's office retrieved the remains not that long ago, so they're still in the process of identifying. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done to answer a lot of questions that all of us have.
Is there any indication of
Torrance, sir? Sheriff, we've heard a lot about the police board today. What can you tell us about the 10 victims? 20 people have been shot, 10 people are now dead. Congressman Chu stood there and asked people to report your effort earlier. Today we've had the Vice President say that this type of violence needs to stop. As a community leader,
we will, but not tonight. We'll get there. We'll get there. All the excellent questions, and we will get there. So. Not tonight, because we're still in the process of following up, serving search warrants. We want to get to the motive. We want to know what the heck happened here. The only way we're going to get there is through a lot of very hard detective work, and we plan on doing just that. So thank you very much. Thank you for all of your support today. Couldn't have done this without you. Thank you very much.
That was the sheriff in Los Angeles, Sheriff Luna, wrapping up that press conference on the mass shooting in Monterey Park and the other incident in Alhambra that he mentioned. The shooter, a 72-year-old male Asian Hu Can Tran, died from self-inflicted gunshot wounds after being confronted by the police in Torrance, California, inside his white van. There are no outstanding suspects, they believe, out there. The investigation is ongoing. The motive, we still don't know about the motive there, as we heard from the sheriff and other colleagues in law enforcement and politicians. Carol Lamb, Carmen Best are still with me. Carol, what did you make of that press conference? We still don't know the motivation, but we do know more about the shooter.
Yeah, a couple of things that I take away from that press conference. One is how important it is for local law enforcement and federal law enforcement to work together and not just once every few years. They work together all the time so that when something like this happens, murders like this happen, they can very quickly jump into action and support each other. The other thing has to do with the legality of the possession of that, what appears to be, from the description, a handgun with a large capacity magazine that the sheriff said was it looked like it is illegal in California. That is actually currently being litigated. It was illegal. Those large capacity magazines were illegal. They were deemed illegal by the federal appellate courts. The Supreme Court, in light of one of their other opinions relating to firearms in a New York City case, they have sent that back down to the appellate court in California and said, wow, take another look at this decision in light of our previous decision. So that is a live issue at this time.
Amazing. Amazing that it's a live issue. Just to remind our viewers, it's a magazine-fed, semi-automatic assault pistol that had an extended large capacity attached to it. That was found at the scene at the second location where he was confronted by two American heroes. Carmen, let me ask you this. Congresswoman Judy Chu spoke there, and she had a bunch of questions that we still don't know the answers to. What was the motive for the shooter? Did he have a history of domestic violence, as many mass shooters do? How did he get these guns, legally or not? Important questions.
Absolutely important questions, and ones that people, I can tell you, investigators are behind the scenes right now looking for answers. They'll run the suspect's name to determine if there was any criminal history, if anyone has a restraining order.
For your time. That is all I'm here for tonight on Sunday, but our coverage continues. I'm going to hand it over to my friend Ayman Mohyuddin, who's here to pick up the coverage. Ayman, I don't want to overstress this point as the immigrant here, as the guy who's lived in America less than 10 years, but no other country, no one else in any other country in the West lives like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's safe to say that other countries have all kinds of problems similar to the U.S. But, you know, one of the points, Mehdi, in that press conference that stood out to me that I think gets to the heart of what you're saying is what the sheriff said. The status quo is not working.